I never understood the insistence on labeling what corporate buyers in CDR are doing as philanthropy. Although it takes some openness to risk to support early-stage ventures which don't have a defined market future, we wouldn't call what venture capital or corporate venture capital is doing philanthropy. So why do we do it in CDR? I guess what seemingly makes it look altruistic is that unlike in venture capital, buyers who enter the agreements with suppliers don't gain equity. But that doesn't mean that they don't gain control. What levers for intervention these buyers have really depends on their day-to-day operations. And although there are different ways in which we can group how buyers implement their complementary assets, matching venture support with their operations is probably the most intuitive way. So we can think about the companies in hard-to-abate sector. A company like Equinor that spent decades extracting oil now has probably the best infrastructure and know-how for how to put that CO2 back into those depleted oil wells. Then we find companies in tech sector who are looking into creative ways on how to power CDR. Some methods like direct air capture are extremely energy intensive. So instead of pegging them against the other solutions in fighting for very limited power, what Google is trying to do is to look at how they can use waste heat from their data centers to power CDR like direct air capture. Although we can say that majority of tech companies are mostly providing data, workflows, and that includes the digital measurement verification and reporting, DMRV. When we spoke about services in episode 4, we said that there are buyers who are turning into intermediaries. Let's now see how this works in practice. Take e-commerce platform strategy, for example. In 2019, the platform enters as exploratory buyer, committing few tons. Then, that exploration informs something more formal, where the platform dedicates a fund for climate technologies. This can be seen as a form of thought leadership, which first only informs about the latest innovation that the fund deems is most impactful. From there, platform opens its distribution channels, meaning that fund is not necessarily only for internal purposes, but what it actually does is connecting to the other buyers. Instead of being presented as a pure marketplace, it acts more as a consultant, which gives it more legitimacy. Then, a fee is slowly charged from both sides. Downstream customers, who in this case are smaller retailers using the platform, and in the last phase, those who are meant to benefit, the climate tech startups, also at some point have to pay for visibility on the platform. This is nothing new because for most platforms that we typically use, there's this freemium at the beginning and later something that turns into a premium once the market has grown and when the solution is widespread. But what should startups take away from this example? Since intermediaries are driving diversification, as we've seen in the example of e-commerce platform, which can result in a pretty symbolic support for the startup, how startups should respond is to also diversify. They should diversify their entry channels, meaning that it should rarely be just one platform, because once it decides to switch from freemium to premium, you should not be locked in, or at least you should be in a situation where you've already done the homework so you know which one of them is going to take the least cut of your carbon-based revenue. What I mean by carbon-based revenue, how it is conceptualized and how it is negotiated between suppliers, buyers, and intermediaries in the CDR market, be sure to check our publication.